Have you ever heard a sound that no one else can? Like a constant ringing or a buzzing, a hissing that just refuses to go away? If that sounds at all familiar, you are definitely not alone. This whole experience actually has a name, and some new research is offering a really promising new way to handle it. So let's dive into this fascinating new approach to one of the most common and most invisible conditions out there.
Okay, so first things first, let's get on the same page. The medical term for this is tinnitus, and the most important word here is perception. It's the perception of sound when there's no actual external noise causing it. The sound is coming from inside, which makes it this really personal and, let's be honest, often incredibly frustrating thing to deal with.
And we're not talking about some super rare condition here. This is something that millions and millions of people in the United States alone experience. It's a huge issue that affects a massive part of the population, but for some reason, it's still pretty misunderstood.
Now, here's where the story really starts to get hopeful. While it's true there isn't an outright cure for tinnitus, the key thing to focus on is this. It's considered an extremely manageable condition. So the goal isn't necessarily total elimination. It's about reducing the symptoms and managing the impact through a really smart, structured plan.
So, before we jump into the solution, let's just take a second to understand why managing tinnitus is so important. What's the real-world impact to this unheard sound?
Well, for a lot of people, it is so much more than just a minor annoyance. It can seriously mess with your daily life, your concentration, your sleep, your emotional well-being. It can become this really debilitating factor for both your physical and your mental health, which is exactly why finding ways to manage it effectively is so critical.
All right, let's get to the heart of this new research. Researchers are looking at this problem through a new lens, with a pretty novel three-part approach they're calling the SEC method.
So here it is, the SEC method. It's all about tackling tinnitus from three totally different angles. First up, you've got S for sensation. This uses sound therapy to deal with the physical sound itself. Then there's E for emotion. This is all about using counseling and relaxation to manage your reaction to the sound. And finally, C is for cognition, which uses things like internet-based cognitive behavioral therapy to help you reframe the negative thoughts that can come with tinnitus.
Now, that all sounds great in theory, right? But the big question is, does it actually work in the real world? Well, a study was put together to find out just how effective this management plan really is.
So it's important to know how they did this. It was what's called an exploratory study with a retrospective design. All that means is that the researchers looked back at existing data from patients who were treated between June 2021 and April 2023. It just helps us put the results into the right context. They looked at a bunch of potential subjects, but for this analysis, they really zeroed in on a group of 50 participants who checked all the right boxes and met the specific criteria.
And just to give you a quick snapshot of this group, the majority of them, about 64%, had what's called bilateral tinnitus. That just means they experienced the ringing in both of their ears.
Now, the rules for being included in the study were super specific, and they line up perfectly with that SEC method we just talked about. Every single one of these 50 people had used sound generators for the sensation piece, they'd all attended counseling for the emotion piece, and they'd all used online CBT modules for the cognition piece. They had the full package.
Okay, so we have the method, we have the participants who followed it. Now it's time for the big reveal. What did the data actually show? And how did they even measure relief?
Before we get to the numbers, you need to know about the tool they use to measure success. It's called the Tinnitus Reaction Questionnaire, or TRQ. Just think of it like a scoring system for how much distress and negative impact the tinnitus is having on someone's life. A higher score means more distress. Simple as that.
So here's the bottom line. If this SCC method was actually doing its job, we'd expect to see those TRQ scores go way down after the treatment. So, did they?
Oh, absolutely. The results were pretty undeniable. The average TRQ score for the group before treatment was 57.1, but after going through the three-part SCC plan, that average score plummeted all the way down to 31.5. I mean, that is a massive reduction.
And we're not talking about a tiny little dip here. The researchers concluded that this drop was a clinically significant reduction in tinnitus-related distress. In other words, this wasn't just a number changing on a spreadsheet. This comprehensive approach made a real, meaningful difference in these patients' lives.
This is all incredibly promising stuff. So what are the big takeaways from all this and, what happens next?
Well, for clinicians, the message seems pretty clear. This data really supports the idea of using a comprehensive strategy that hits all three dimensions of tinnitus: the sensory part, the emotional part, and the cognitive part.
It seems like combining tools like sound generators, counseling, and iCBT is a very, very effective way to go.
Of course, good science is always looking ahead. The researchers are careful to point out that because this was a look-back study, the data is what you'd call exploratory. So what's next is more research to dig even deeper and figure out how effective each individual piece of the CSC plan is on its own.
And that really leaves us with this final, powerful question. This study strongly suggests that maybe, instead of searching for one single magic bullet, the real key to taming the ring is a holistic approach, one that treats the sound, the feeling, and the thought all at once. And for millions of people, that is a truly hopeful development.